me tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about my story, my background. Right, I grew up in Washington D.C., born in 1980, born in the era of the crack epidemic here in Washington D.C. That epidemic devastated our whole city. Right, a lot of murder, a lot of violence, a lot of lawlessness, and it was a lot of getting money too at the same time. Right, and I speak about this era because I seen how it affected my community and it affected my family. Right. At that time, crack was the new drug. So when you have young people, young parents, right, in their 20s, in their late teens, having children, like what my parents did, they had me at 18. They thinking that this is the new social drug that everybody can just use and have fun and is all good, but it didn't work like that. Maybe it started out good, but it ended up bad with, multiple members of my family being addicted to drugs, and it affected the way that we were raised. It affected the way that we had to come up in the neighborhood and be able to survive. My family was always filled with love and respect and attention and structure and discipline. But my family was affected by the crack epidemic in a major, major way. And that ultimately affected me and reshaped my mentality on how I needed to survive as I started to come of age. So when I was a teen, I started selling drugs. I started selling crack cocaine and carrying pistols, right? Which landed me in some unfavorable situations during that period in my life. I was sneaking guns in school at 16 years old. A pistol that I had purchased from a friend of mine, right? But this was the environment. This was the era that we were in. So it affected us in that way because of what we seen on a daily basis. And fortunately for me that I'm still here alive to tell these stories, but that's why I want to tell the stories so that I can try to help some other young men in that same predicament to know that it is a better way and that you do have hope for a better future and a better tomorrow if you apply these rules and these principles that we're going to touch on throughout this program. Right? By the time I was 18 years old, I was already, knee deep off into the drug game. Okay? By the time I was 19, I caught my first felony charge for an attempt robbery. But before that, I had already been locked up multiple times. But through the blessings of God, I never served any jail time and went up the road for any of those charges. But all of this was a byproduct of the environment that I was living in. Right? It was a point in my life where I started to rebel from maybe 15 all the way up till 18, 19, when I started, having trouble with the law. I was in a rebellious mode. And the reason that I was rebelling is because I was trying to find myself. I was angry on the inside because I didn't have my dad around in the way that I wanted him to be able to steer me in the right direction. I didn't have that acceptance that I wanted from my father. So I was seeking that same acceptance from external sources, which ended up being my friends in the streets. Now, I always had my uncles around who took time for me and never denied me their time and wanting to pour into me what they had. But again, this is not a person that you live with. So when you have someone who's delegating time to you and for you, though you may be grateful, having someone there for you full time is a better circumstance, especially from a male's perspective, because men have a tendency to be more self-destructive and more violent when they don't get their way. So this is part of what I suffered throughout that era in my life. And when I got off into the illegal activities of the streets, I jumped knee deep off in it. Bought me a pistol, started hustling. Because I knew that this was the protocol. I knew that this was the uniform of the game that I was playing. In any game, you gotta abide by the rules of the game, and you have to secure you a uniform. If you playing in a basketball game, it's a uniform for basketball. Tank top, shorts, high top shoes. If you playing in a football game, it's a uniform for the football game. Shoulder pads, thigh pads, knee pads, cleats, mouth guard, helmet, right? It's a uniform. Jersey, it's a uniform for that game. When you jumping off into the street game, it's a uniform for that. And you gonna need a pistol while you out there. And I knew that. So that was the first thing I did. Before I even got my first pack, I had a pistol already. Because I knew that once the money started to come, I was gonna need to be able to protect myself. Right? But on the flip side of that, I knew that if I continued on down this same path, either I was going to have to kill somebody or somebody was going to end up killing me. So by 1999, I had my first criminal charge, attempt robbery. Fortunately for me, I took a plea deal in that case and ended up with probation. Right? But that didn't stop me because I was already committed to what I was doing. And the probation, I didn't have to serve any jail time. So in essence, the punishment wasn't severe enough to get my attention. So I carried on. I continued on hustling, doing whatever I was doing for that era in my life. And by 2003, I caught another charge. This time, I caught another charge, possession of crack cocaine, possession with intent to distribute, and I had carrying a pistol without a license again. So now I got another run-in with the law. But this time, it was more severe. Right? This time, I wasn't offered any plea deal. Although I would have took one, I was already ready to take a cop to the infractions that they had caught me with. Because I knew they had caught me red-handed. I was already ready to take a cop. But they never offered me one. So one time when I was sitting in jail and my lawyer came to visit me, I told him that I wanted to take a cop because I felt like because they jumped out on me and caught me red-handed with everything, that it wasn't no way for me to get out of this. I knew they had caught me red-handed. The lawyer looked me in my face and said, well, they're not offering you a cop unless you want to debrief. Now, I'm young at the time. I'm maybe 22. So from the first charge in 99, whereas I was 19 years old, and then the second charge in 2003, I was still 22 years old, though. They locked me up at the beginning of 2003. So I had just turned 22 the year before. And when I told him that I wanted to take a cop, he said, well, they're not offering you a cop unless you want to debrief. I said, well, what's debriefing? He said, you got to snitch on somebody, right? I said, I ain't doing that. So I already knew what time it was for me because I would have took the cop had they offered me a cop, but they didn't offer me a cop because they felt like they had me red-handed with everything that I was being charged with. So they wanted to back me in the corner. And they backed me in the corner by relegating me to have to debrief if I wanted them to, in essence, grant me a request. My request was to take a cop. They didn't want to grant me one unless you do what we want you to do. So I said, I ain't doing that. I don't do that. So they said, well, all right, Mr. Brown, we'll see you in trial, right? So they said, we'll see you in trial. So At this point, I started doing my own research at the law library, right? I started writing certain things about my defense that I knew I could leverage and that I could use in a way to help benefit my case. And when my lawyer would come visit me, I would give him my notes and we would go over different angles of my case that I could use in my own defense. So even behind the wall, even sitting in jail, I wasn't sitting on my hands. You see, that's one of the principles of manhood right there. That's one of the leadership principles. You see, so I was still exercising leadership for myself over my own life, even while I was sitting in jail fighting for my life at that time. I was fighting for my life at that time. Right? So, fast forward a few months down the road when I had to stand trial. So, I was on trial for possession of crack cocaine, possession with intent to distribute crack cocaine, and a loaded pearl handle 45 caliber pistol with 11 hollow tip bullets in the gun. Now, at that time in DC, they would give you 5 years mandatory for the pistol and then 1 year for each bullet. That's what the guidelines were at that time. I don't know what it is now. And then the possession with intent to distribute crack cocaine, that was a 10-year charge. And the possession charge, I forget how many years just for possession. So it's two different aspects with possession and possession with intent to distribute, right? So I'm on trial for all of this, but now my lawyer in my defense, he's using some of the rhetoric and some of the angles that I gave him handwritten by myself from sitting in jail, right? He's using some of the language and some of the verbiage that he and I worked on from me, jotting down these notes about my case and about different case laws that I had found out on my own. So in essence, it was a collaborative effort with me being defended on trial for these charges. And my case was a couple of days. So at the end of the case, right? Let me backtrack too as well. Because when I was in jail, because I had been locked up before this particular instance that I'm sharing with you guys, but I had got off, right? I thought that I was going to still be able to get off on this time too. But when they didn't offer me the cop, this is when I knew it was serious. This is when I knew that this was God really trying to get my attention, because he didn't offer me any way out aside from coming back to him. So it was one night when I came back from visiting my lawyer, and when they didn't offer me the cop, I knew I had to pray a different way. And that particular time when I prayed, I just looked up and, I told the Lord, I said, look, if you get me out of this, I'm done with the streets. If you get me out of this right here, which is something that I knew I couldn't get myself out of. See, any other time, I was used to getting myself out of stuff. But in this particular instance, it was no way for me to get myself out of this. So I knew the only person that could get me out was the person who had been sustaining me the whole time, and that was the Creator. So I told him, and I said, look, if you get me out of this, I'm done with the streets. You ain't going to have me to worry about no more with being in the street life. So now we enter into the trial that lasted a couple of days. At the end of those couple of days, I end up being found not guilty. Now, even though they caught me with everything red-handed, but I stood trial and they found me not guilty. Now, how does this work? It works, one, for having faith, but two, for exercising a degree of leadership as well and doing study on my own case while I was sitting behind the wall, while I was sitting in the jail cell with nowhere to go. And I realized that when I was in the street life, I wanted leadership, but I was seeking leadership the wrong way. I was seeking it the wrong way. And I begun to realize that now that this circumstance was over in my life, I had to start recreating myself. I had to start recreating myself, who I was going to be as a man, what my legacy was going to be, what the testimony of my life would be, what examples I would leave. I knew that I had to start doing that, or else I was going to go back to the same old behavior at some point that got me into the situation that I had just came out of. So I knew I had to go my own way, right? And in going legit, I tried a few career paths, right? At one point, I was in the local union 26 for electricians. I did that for a couple of years. Then I transitioned from there, and I got into telecommunication. I did that for a short window of time. I transitioned from there and got into commercial driving with a Class A CDL. I always knew that if I was going to stay out of the street game, I had to put myself in a position to make a substantial income, because I was already used to being able to carry things a certain way in my personal life. So I knew I couldn't, in essence, be working for peanuts. That's not my style. So acquiring that CDL was actually one of the best things that I could have ever done, because it allowed me to maintain my independence. It allowed me to be able to call my own shots and do my own thing in spite of working with a company. If things didn't work out with that company, I knew I could take my CDL and go anywhere in the country and still find gainful employment. So this is what would keep my income stable and prevent me from going back into the streets. Right? But y'all know old habits die hard. So even though I had went legit from beating that first trial, by the year of 2006 maybe, I had caught another pistol charge. Yeah. I had caught another pistol charge by the year of 2006. And this time, the judge himself told me that he was going to send me to jail. You know, he said he had been looking at my criminal history. He had been looking at my arrest record, and he felt like I had been skating. He felt like I had been getting off too much, and that I wasn't going to learn my lesson unless he sent me to jail. Right? Now, before I went to stand trial for this case, I corralled my network, and I got people to write letters for me. I asked certain people if they could show up to court with me, and all of this helped me. It helped me represent myself in front of this same judge. So all of the letters that I had got people to write, when the judge read them the night before my trial was the following day, he told me all of this. He said, well, Jabar, look, all of these letters you got, I read them last night, and I was intent on sending you to jail because I felt like you wasn't going to learn your lesson unless I did, and that you had been getting off too much. But when I read all of these letters from these people, and I see all the people that's here with you in court, it's obvious that you mean something to somebody. This is what the man said to me. He said, it's obvious that you mean something to somebody, so I'm going to give you one more chance. This is what the man said. The man said, I'm going to give you one more chance. And he said, you better not mess it up. So he gave me 2-year probation without sending me to jail. So this is the second time that I had to face the judge, and I wasn't sent to jail. Right? Now, don't miss what I shared with you about having people to write those letters for me and having people to show up at court for me. You see, this is the relationship component of our manhood equation, right? Because I had good enough relationships with other people in professional areas and in my private life also. These people were noteworthy in their careers. They were notable in their profession. My family loved me. My family respected me. I had good relationships with the members of my family who I asked to come to court for me, right?